Good evening, one and all. We welcome you all to the international webinar series on holistic health, well-being, and sustainable development 2022, commemorating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, nation celebrating 75 years of independence, and UN Sustainable Development Goals 2015-2030. In collaboration with Sri Holistic Health Foundation India and Sri Research Institute and Center for Art, Sciences and Wellbeing. So before we start our session, let's take the blessings of Almighty.
कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः.
With the blessings of Almighty, we shall continue to today's session. Today we have with us Ms. Christina Keegan. She is a professional social worker from Nigeria, Africa. She is practicing social work in medical social work in hospital setting, community development and services in communities, forensic social work with the Nigeria Prison Service, psychiatry and mental health as a clinical social worker till date. We welcome you, Christina Kagan, once again to the international webinar series, and we invite you to take over for your session on gender sensitivity in leadership. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Christina, please continue.
Okay. I'll start. Thank you, Doctor, for inviting me. My name is Christiana Keegan, as introduced, from Nigeria. I am a clinical social worker by profession, and I practice in the field of mental health. And I'm pleased to be your anchor this afternoon. I'm sorry for joining late. My network had issues, but I have sorted that out. My topic on gender sensitivity in leadership came about as a result of responding to the topic to be the monthly the topic for the month, and also to share knowledge and experiences, especially in this part of the world that I'm from. I am from Nigeria, as said by Dr. Ravindra, and we have experiences of this topic, personal experiences of this topic, gender sensitivity in leadership. I'll start by allowing us to look at what gender means to us. Gender as a concept occupied in a significant place like Nigeria. When it comes to leadership, it has varied meanings, but at the root of it, it's the idea of sociocultural induced belief, which states the function and roles that is expected to be played by both sexes, that's male and female. So the gender roles defines what is termed gender and it is these roles are usually very unique and specific to both genders. Then, aside from their biological functions, gender is more or less a social construct, a socially constructed inequality between women and men. It is clearly argued that gender is a social construct. It defines and differentiates the roles, rights, responsibilities, and obligations of women and men. The innate biological differences between females and males from the basis of social norms that defines appropriate behaviors for women and also for men and determines the differential social, economic, and political power between the sexes. In the same vein, the United Nations definition of gender as cited by E.A. Ikebu Avas thus the qualities associated with men and women that are socially and culturally, then biologically determined. Gender includes the way in which the society differentiates appropriate behavior and access to power for women and men. Although the details vary from society to society and change over time, gender relations tend to include a strong element of inequality between women and men and are strongly influenced by ideologies. From what was stated above on gender, it is obvious that gender is not natural phenomenon, but an idea that is deeply rooted in the psychic of many people, particularly in the country I am from. In determination of what functions to perform by people, will this and this be performed by man or woman because of who the person, not the mental wellness of the being. Unfortunately, in this part of the country, it is mostly a patriarchal society where male dominance is more, or and then different fees where we have where every opportunities to thrive, equal opportunities to or come to the fore in their two roles. But in this part of the country, it is not like that. So even in governance or in leadership, we have more men gender in leadership positions than the female gender. Though things are changing with awareness and sensitization. There are human rights bodies that are coming up to say no, there should be equal share and equal participation in either holding leadership positions or in governance positions. So I will continue by looking at helping us see. I'll say a little about leadership before I connect to my topic and my link them up as stated in the topic: gender sensitivity in leadership. Leadership has been derived from the old English word leading, which means lead. It is the act and act of guiding, conducting, taking decisions, and etc. According to them, leadership could be viewed as the act and act of decision making in conducting affairs, whether personal or impersonal. Gender and leadership style in Nigeria. Just to introduce that, this presentation contains that gender is not natural phenomenon but an artificial creation which has adversely affected the female sex, as stated in my introduction, when the issue of leadership is in focus, leadership as a concept is not bent in favor or disfavor of any particular sex. It is in this vein that Ortega, aligning with Plato, argued there is therefore no administrative occupation which is peculiar to women or men as natural, which is peculiar to men or women. Natural capacities are similar attributed in each sexes, and it is natural for women to take part in all occupations as well as men. Now let's look at professions. Like take for instance the medical profession. We have both males and we have females. When we look at other professions like our social work professions, we have both sexes and both genders practicing and taking equal responsibilities. When it comes to governance, we have women who are capable to lead and in every capacity. But when it comes to some countries, and I'm using my country as an example, my country, Nigeria, the gender the gender sensitivity is imbalanced. So most times the women are made or are seen to occupy low positions or are referred to persons or people that are not capable to be given certain positions like give a country. Though we have some countries that have females as the presidents of those countries, but we can count those countries. They are not much, and that explains some of the insensitivities or inequalities that that is seen in leadership or in governance. African tradition, in some traditional African societies, women exercise the most effective sanctions against misrule when a king becomes intolerable of these subjects or processions of grand. Oh, sorry. I take this again. Because I'm quoting this, I don't want to. I want to quote it appropriately. I take it again. First, okay. There is therefore no administrative occupations which is peculiar to women as well as men. Natural capacities are similarly attributed in each sexes, and it's natural for women to take part in occupations as well as men. So third, there are queens and kings, heroes and heroines. This implies positions of leadership, but scarcely not so in many African countries as stated. Traditionally, women do not have an active voice in purely political affairs, that is, the privilege of a final say in any decision concerning matters of common interest. However, women possess a consultative voice which can exert significantly political influences, especially in matters that concerns women directly. In matters of communal interest, a woman is likely not expected to speak her mind, especially when it concerns the male gender. So in conclusion, I would like to say that gender sensitivity in the colonial era of Nigeria Though in the pre-colonial Nigeria, the issues of gender and leadership was to the advantage of the men as against the women. The colonial systems made it worse. It was obvious that colonialism did not deviate from the preclusion of women from public sphere. Colonialism itself was a male dominated venture, as well as all colonial officers were males, and we still see that extending till date. Sure, it is the remnant of colonialism, like my professor Wali, my mentor and coach will always say. Most of the issues affecting most societies in the world that has constituted a problem are remnants from colonial um, colonization remnants, which is true. And we're seeing it in this presentation that the issues of gender differentiation has stemmed from the colonial era. Even at every leadership position, it is hard to see more women, and I wonder why. But the situation seems very hopeful because things are changing. They're not like before. Like I said, we have countries that have their presidents as women, but the truth of the matter is, no matter what, women are still left behind, are still not equally represented as the men or the male gender folks. But our desire and our aspiration would be to continue to see that women are given their place and as equal as the male. I am not projecting this because, or I'm not emphasizing this because I'm a female gender, but it's a fact that have been researched, and it's a fact that is obviously seen in every sphere. Even though I cannot say that this is a equal reflection in every other country, but I use Nigeria as a case study to make my facts clear this afternoon. At this point, I stop here to take any comments or questions before we call it a day. Thank you very much. Any comments, please? Comments, questions?
No, Christina, have you done with your presentation?
Hello?
Yeah, please continue. No questions.
Okay, no questions. Okay, so future arguments on gender sensitivity, I'll take that for our knowledge. Gender as a concept is a social humanistic construct, a gimmick. It is quite different from leadership as a concept. While gender is used as a maneuver tool to the disadvantage of mostly the female sex in terms of social functions and roles between the sexes, leadership is not supposed to be subjected to the whims and caprice of any sex. Leadership as a concept, especially as it has been defined by various scholars, contains such items as decision making, ability to persuade, inspire, or influence the behavior and attitude of others, yeah, etc. This and many more cannot be the attributes, character, or futures that is exclusive to a particular sex or gender. Both the male and the female sexes have to acquire such attributes or nature such attributes or nurture such character. Leadership is all about natural participation with others in with others. An individual cannot inspire or influence his or her behavior and attitude all by his or herself. This suggests that there must be the implementary side, followership, because leadership can only find meaning and expression when the complementary side, um, that fellowship, is involved. The complementary side, which is the followership, is involved. Here, the item followership does not mean subordination or inferiority, but it denotes associates, admires people, and believers. Uh, it is obvious that leadership and followership imply political participation. Meanwhile, political participation refers to a variety of ways whereby people try to exercise influences over political processes. Nevertheless, any political process that seeks to get the best brains must cut across gender. Interestingly, the best of human brains do not function following the gender uh, bifurcation. It is based on how it is nurtured and put to use. The likes of Queen Amina of Zozo in Nigeria, also have people like Queen Elizabeth and other women that have held leadership positions, have led both males and females and were given equal opportunities to thrive. But that is not the case in Nigeria. Um, in Nigeria and other countries. Probably these celebrated women were more philosophically conscious and concerned than many of the present day women, especially here in Nigeria. They do not demand their rights uh, from the prevailing cultures and traditions. Neither do they succumb to the male dominations as seen in most leadership or in most countries. And now, in conclusion, from a female a female or a female gender group a meeting held in Beijing, China in 1995, women in other parts of the world have reached the apex of leadership in their respective countries, either as presidents, as stated earlier, head of states, or heads of governance. Such countries as Chile, Brazil, Germany, Liberia, Bangladesh, etc. Also, regional and regional parliaments, women have achieved the 30% affirmative actions plan for women in governance. Like in Nigeria, there's always a push for 30% representation, but I think that's still not enough. That's still not fair. If only the both sexes can be given equal opportunity to lead in governance and to uh, uh, um, take the leadership for themselves and um, contribute to the growth and functioning of their country, I think it would be a fair issue. It would be a fair opportunity. No doubt, Nigeria has abundance of gifted women and men in terms of leadership. What is needed is change of mindset and attitude towards the issues of gender and leadership. Gender ought to not be mixed with leadership. Absolutely. Gender, yes, are social constructs. They are social positions or roles given to both sexes, but it should not come in the way of leadership, or it should not be a yardstick to measure capability or capacity to lead. Okay, so this will be some of this will be the suggestion. So considering the abundant gifts and intelligence and capabilities of women, people, both sexes, both males and females, should be given equal opportunities to lead. So we need to see 50-50 chance or 50-50 opportunity to lead. So in governance, we should not see 30% women gender and 70% male gender, but both sexes need to be given equal opportunities as already seen in other countries. Thank you very much. Any other comments in addition to this presentation? Thank you for good listening. Hello.
Thank you, Christina.
Can anyone hear me? Thank you, Mary. Can you go on?
Yeah, Mary ma'am, you can unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself,
Christina,
please.
it's a very learning session for me. Learning session, and I don't know much about this topic, but it's a lot of learning for me. Each time you bring different topic. Now it's I'm not used to this topic. For me, it's learning a lot, and I learned a lot of takeaway from this session. All the best. God bless you. Take care.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to hear your comments about this topic, gender sensitivity in leadership. I believe that in all of our countries represented on this platform, we have opportunities and we have platforms to lead. We have on this platform Dr. Ravindra as our leader, and you, Mary Florence, the coordinator with him. And it hasn't been, I'm happy we have this group, male, female, coordinating this group. And thankfully, I'm pleased to have a leader like Dr. Ravindra, who understands that everyone can come. He's always calling out to me from Africa to say that they want more speakers from here, regardless. As long as you have something to offer, as long as people can share knowledge, they have knowledge that they can share. It doesn't matter who presents this knowledge to everyone for our benefit. So I thank you so much. And Mary, it's not as bad as it used to be in my country, where women are silenced. Women are not expected to talk when the male gender talking, but it is getting better. It's just that some supposed to be better. The speed we are pushing forward and developing ourselves as the female gender folks to see how we can increase our knowledge, capacity, and our opportunity to share in our leadership position. Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind comments. Thank you. Any more questions and comments?
Yeah, it was a wonderful session. You gave insights into leadership, and especially women in leadership. Participants, if you have any queries, feel free to ask. Unmute yourself. If there are no queries, then we shall conclude.
So thank you very much, Doctor, for the opportunity to share on this topic. I look forward to sharing more knowledge from other aspects of knowledge acquired in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina Kagan, once again for joining us and for your wonderful session. On behalf of Sri Holistic Health Foundation India and Sri Research Institute Center for Art Sciences and Wellbeing, we wish you all the success for your future endeavors, and also we look forward for more sessions in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Today we are also commemorating World Population Day. So let's take some insights on how population is affecting all of us, the planet, the environment, the climate, and let's see what are the challenges that are being faced by the excessive population.
Wow. Thank you and all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. As per your convenience, you can stay back.
In the time you watch this, almost 1,200 people will have been added to our population. Breathing the same oxygen, sharing the same space, and creating more and more greenhouse gases.
Worries about overpopulation are back.
We need to address much more aggressively the population part of the equation.
If we keep ignoring this exponential population rise, nature will reduce human population for us.
Is this the whole story?
There's a lot of misconceptions about the nature of population growth.
This debate is, it is not understood in a way it should be.
How many is really too many? And what does the answer have to do with frozen food? Let's start at the very beginning, when more people around meant security in an insecure world. On the Indian subcontinent, for example, Chanakya the philosopher suggested that widows quickly find new husbands. And during the Mughal rule, the increase in population was celebrated as it meant more people could work on a farm and produce more food. The Roman emperors were no different, in some cases passing laws to promote early marriage and frequent childbirth so their armies could stay up to strength. Life was mostly about popping babies and setting up new colonies until the number of people started becoming a visible problem. In the 18th century, British economist Thomas Malthus started ringing alarm bells. Okay, ancient history lesson done. In more modern times, the fear exploded with the publication of a book called The Population Bomb. Its author, an American biologist, warned the Western world of the conditions he had seen in New Delhi. Overpopulation was soon blamed for everything from poverty and poor resource management to destroying the environment. Some countries began experimenting with morally and politically dubious methods of population control. China became the poster child, and its one-child policy resulted in a disastrous gender imbalance. And like other control measures in Asia, it was eventually repealed. But the enemy had been identified as overpopulation. So what exactly is overpopulation? It is defined by carrying capacity, a slightly complicated concept, which basically means the number of individuals and ecosystems resources like food, water, and space can sustain indefinitely. But demographers have consistently got it wrong.
The early calculation says only 4 billion is the carrying capacity of Earth. But today, we are almost feeding the more than 7 billion population because we have supplemented our natural resources with the technological resources, and we have to produce the resources to sustain the population.
So we're not quite sure what the Earth's carrying capacity is because the variables are constantly changing. One thing's for sure, it's not the population element that's going to be the problem. Already in the developed world, the population has largely stabilized or begun to decline. And the developing world is on track to follow. Education and access to contraception are driving the numbers down, even if cities don't look like it yet.
And people get this perception that, these cities are overcrowded and they're really busy. Well, actually what's happened is that planners haven't really taken into account the population growth that's going to happen anyway. And then there's a second point, which is actually the bigger impacts on the environment are linked to consumption.
Hell, that's all I can say.
As seen around the world, consumption, unlike population, is on an exponential rise.
If we look at our levels of consumption across different contexts, globally, across cities, within cities, they're highly, highly unequal.
Okay, so let's then look at how we are consuming resources in that equation. Every year, researchers look at the Earth's annual resource budget and calculate at what point we will use it up. If we look at this by country, the differences are startling. Many nations in the Middle East and West exhaust their budget in the first quarter, while a few countries like India don't overshoot yet.
The average American consumes 16 times of higher resources than an average Indian.
And correspondingly, how much carbon dioxide we emit around the world is different too. In 2018, an Indian family of 4 had a carbon footprint of less than 8 tons. An American family of 4 in the same year came in at almost 70. So shouldn't we then be looking at who is consuming and how much, instead of simply counting the number of people? One of the first studies to compare global emissions involved over 200 diverse researchers and policymakers. The result, called Project Drawdown, published a definitive list on reducing our impact.
We did very complex models, and we didn't know what they would be. I had a strong hunch of what the top 10 would be, and I was completely wrong, and all the rest of us were wrong. Number 1 was refrigerant management.
Yes, you heard that right. The way we keep things cool is one of our worst offenses against the planet. Our air conditioners and refrigerators still largely emit greenhouse gases much stronger than carbon dioxide when cooling or transporting frozen goods. The project estimates that changing to more efficient cooling could save 5 times more emissions than if all cars became electric. Another big one on the list is something we can all individually do something about.
Food is huge. It's about almost a third of all global emissions go to the food system. Waste nothing, if possible.
No one can really deny that the human population has an impact on the environment. But right now, wealthier countries emit so much carbon that even adding 3 or 4 billion people in the global south won't significantly impact the rate of climate change. Also, lowering consumption sounds way easier than deciding whether that many people should or shouldn't exist.
To say there's too many people is sort of an unkindness to a person, you know, like which person thinks there are too many? You know, no one.
It's time to change the narrative, away from the easy-to-blame visual problem of population to the more hidden and dangerous concerns of waste and overconsumption. We try to answer the biggest questions concerning climate change today. For more videos like this, subscribe to our new channel where we post every Friday.
All life on Earth, from ecosystems to human civilization, is vulnerable to a changing climate. Scientific evidence now shows that the current human-caused global warming of 1.1 degrees Celsius is increasingly impacting nature and people's lives everywhere, despite efforts to adapt to the changing climate. More frequent and severe climate extreme events, such as heat waves over land and in the ocean, droughts and flooding, have caused widespread and pervasive impacts to ecosystems, people, cities and infrastructure, and limit the chances of a livable future for all. There is new knowledge that human-induced climate change caused these destructive impacts or makes them more likely.
This report is important because I think it really underscores the fact that the scientific evidence is now unequivocal. It's clear that climate change is impacting on the well-being of human societies, but also on the well-being of our planet. This report really brings us a new message, though, that those two things are not separate, that there's a very intimate relationship between our well-being, the well-being of our planet, and the forces that are driving climate change and the resulting impacts and responses that we may have to that challenge.
Since the last assessment report, the scientific evidence has increased and emphasized, based on observations of impacts, how the ecosystems and human society are changing under the influence of climate change. We see the losses and damages, and on both sides we have specific examples that indicate the underpinning mechanisms, and we are learning from that also for our projections as global warming is proceeding, what to expect for the future and what the future losses and damages will be if climate change cannot be stopped.
The extent and magnitude of climate change impacts are larger for each additional fraction of warming than estimated in previous assessments. So are the risks projected for the future. The impacts involve severe and widespread disruptions to nature and to society, reducing our ability to grow nutritious food or provide clean drinking water.
The poorest communities are the ones that are strongest hit by climate change, as they're least able to cope with the growing impacts. Our assessment indicates that there are between 3.3 and 3.6 billion people who live in such hotspots. These are spread across parts of Africa, South Asia, South and Central America, small islands, and the Arctic. Climate change acts like a stress multiplier in these regions, where people have limited access to clean drinking water, to sanitation, to health facilities or education. The livelihoods of people are also strongly dependent on climate-sensitive activities such as farming and fishing. They have limited access to funding, limited accountability from governments, and limited trust, therefore, in governments. Climate impacts are also felt differentially by men and women, as they have different roles and responsibilities in society.
This report shows that climate change is impacting every ecosystem across the globe, from high mountain ecosystems to the deep ocean, from tropical coral reefs all the way to Arctic ice-driven ecosystems. We see the fingerprint of climate change across all of these systems. One of the other things that the report really shows is that extreme events are increasing and their effects are rapidly changing ecosystems across the globe. So marine heat waves on land, storm events, these are driving changes to the ecosystems and species that we rely on. This is pushing species towards polar regions, it's pushing species to higher, cooler altitudes or down into the deeper, cool waters. And because of that, it has cascading impacts across ecosystems, but also people's livelihoods and societies that depend on the services that these ecosystems provide. And as we approach the limits of what species and ecosystems can tolerate, we risk crossing what we call tipping points, these critical places in the system where returning to previous conditions where recovery is less possible.
Climate change impacts are magnified in cities, where more than half of the world's population lives today. Heat waves amplify urban heat islands and air pollution in cities that affect people's health. Critical infrastructure within settlements, such as transportation, water, sanitation, and energy systems, have been compromised by extreme weather events. Cities and settlements by the sea are specifically impacted by climate hazards. They are at the front line of climate change, being directly exposed to interacting climate and non-climate coastal hazards, such as sea level rise and destruction of local ecosystems that previously protected people living along the coast.
Multiple climate hazards are also occurring simultaneously, with often cascading impacts. These impacts are becoming increasingly complex and challenging to manage. How these will affect nature and people depends on the speed and level of warming and how we adapt.
The Working Group 2 report of the IPCC shows that the impact of climate change is worsened by destruction of habitats, also unsustainable use of natural resources, deforestation, and growing urbanization and population growth trends. The report also found that for the African region, increasing urbanization is an important compounding factor for climate change. For the coastal areas of Africa, especially the low-lying coastal areas, population is increasing rapidly because of the economic opportunities that the coastal environment presents. Many people moving into the coastal areas live in informal settlements, marginal areas, and high-risk areas. And this has implications because the threats of climate change is compounded and the ecosystems and the people that rely on them are affected.
El reporte muestra que tenemos acciones de adaptación importantes en diferentes partes del planeta, pero los avances no son similares en diferentes regiones y de hecho no estamos haciendo suficientes esfuerzos para alcanzar los niveles de adaptación necesitados por los niveles actuales de calentamiento. Eso resulta en vacíos de adaptación importantes, especialmente en regiones de bajos ingresos como mi propio país, Guatemala, donde vemos barreras importantes que vienen no solamente de aspectos financieros, sino también de aspectos institucionales. La buena noticia es que sí tenemos acciones de adaptación que podemos hacer para reducir nuestros niveles de vulnerabilidad, pero la efectividad de estas acciones dependerá de los niveles de calentamiento. Por lo tanto, tenemos que tener tanto adaptación como mitigación trabajando mano a mano.
We also have evidence of what's called maladaptation. These are adaptation actions that result in unintended consequences. For example, coastal ecosystems that are destroyed through the construction of dikes and seawalls, or climate-related risks that are transferred to other regions or groups in society. Even greenhouse gas emissions can be increased through maladaptation. Our report shows that Indigenous peoples, ethnic minorities and disadvantaged groups, such as low-income households and those living in informal settlements, are some of the most affected by maladaptation. Unfortunately, this reinforces and entrenches already existing inequalities.
The report shows that nature offers significant yet untapped potential to reduce climate risks, to deal with the causes of climate change and to improve people's lives and livelihoods. However, nature needs space and protection to be able to provide those services.
By protecting and restoring 30 to 50% of our world's ecosystems on land and in the ocean, we help plants and animals build climate resilience. Nature, in turn, can help us regulate the climate, give us clean water, control pests and diseases, pollinate our crops, and provide nutritious food. Cities also provide a global opportunity to advance adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development simultaneously. Using different adaptation strategies, such as nature-based and engineering approaches together, or providing social safety nets, can generate wider benefits for health, food security, and ecosystems. However, investing in nature and cities alone isn't enough. To secure a healthy, livable planet for everyone, we need to transform our way of life fundamentally. Taking action now gives us the best chance of success.
Where this report is different is that it puts humankind into context and emphasizes that we cannot abandon this context, because it emphasizes the relationship between three systems: climate, human society, and biodiversity, and indicates how these systems influence each other. Human society causes climate change, it causes biodiversity loss, and these interactions that are underpinning this are also the source of the solutions. With modifying these interactions, we can move into a sustainability space.
So I think one of the important advancements is not only talking about risk, but looking at the solutions that we have available to respond to that risk. But a list of solutions is not adequate. What we need to be able to do is determine the feasibility and effectiveness of those solutions and how they might be drawn into practice. And so it really gives practitioners guidelines about where is the best place to act. We've got very clear pointers, for example, to the protection of ecosystems and activities in cities as ways that we might be able to change the world.
The science is clear. Any delay in concerted global climate action means missing a brief and rapidly closing window to secure a livable future.
This report is a dire warning about the consequences of inaction. It shows that climate change is a grave and mounting threat to our well-being and a healthy planet. Our actions today will shape how people adapt to climate change and how nature responds to increasing climate risks. It recognizes the interdependence of climate, biodiversity, people, and it integrates natural, social, and economic sciences more strongly than earlier IPCC assessments. It emphasizes the urgency of immediate and more ambitious action to address climate risks. Half measures are no longer an option.
IPCC reports provide the most up-to-date science related to climate change for policymakers to inform their decisions on developing climate-related policies. Hundreds of scientists worldwide have volunteered their time and expertise to produce this report. IPCC reports go through an extensive review process by experts and government to achieve the highest quality. This process makes them policy relevant and policy neutral.
Global greenhouse gas emissions from human activities are at their highest levels in human history. But there is increasing evidence of climate action, and the average annual rate of growth in global emissions has slowed in the last decade. The next few years are critical. Without immediate and deep emissions reductions in all sectors, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius will be beyond reach. The IPCC's latest report on climate change mitigation shows that there are options available in every sector that can at least halve emissions by 2030.
What the report shows that if we carry on as we are, we won't be able to limit global warming to 2 degrees, never mind 1.5. But we do find signs of progress. I mean, half the world's emissions are now covered by climate laws and policies, and we're seeing the falling cost of renewable energy and big take-ups. It is beginning to make a difference. So if we look over all the sectors that we cover in the report, we can find options everywhere for reducing emissions, both by technology and by behavioural change. And when you add it all up, you could see the capacity to cut emissions by about a half by 2030, but it would need very prompt and ambitious action for that to actually happen.
The energy sector accounts for about 1/3 of all emissions. An increasing range of policies and laws have enhanced energy efficiency, and since 2010, there have been sustained decreases in cost with reductions of 85% for solar energy and batteries and 55% for wind power. Major transitions are required in this sector to reduce emissions.
To reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the energy system, major changes are needed. We would use far less fossil fuel, meaning that fossil fuels remain unburned. Instead, we would use low-emission energy sources such as wind and solar, and alternative energy carriers such as hydrogen and sustainable biofuels. Moreover, we would use far less energy than today by improving energy efficiency and promoting energy conservation.
Agriculture, forestry, and other land use contribute just over a fifth of greenhouse gas emissions. This sector can not only provide large-scale greenhouse gas emissions reductions, but can also remove and store carbon dioxide at scale.
This report shows that to avoid climate change, we have to conserve ecosystem and improve food system. We have to restore, protect, and sustainably manage carbon-rich ecosystem like forest and grassland, and we have to reduce greenhouse gas intensity of food production system. But also, we have to curb and reduce food waste and loss and shift to more sustainable and healthy diets. All these options can mitigate 8 to 14 gigatons of CO2 per year from now up to 2050 at relatively low cost.
This is the first IPCC assessment to include a chapter on demand services and social aspects of mitigation, looking at how a combination of effective policies, improved infrastructure and technologies leading to behavioral change has the potential to enable emissions reductions.
This report shows for the first time the importance of the social aspects of demand and the huge potential it provides in reducing emissions. It is clear now that human behavior is the center of the problem and also the solution if associated with relevant policies, adapted infrastructures, and if technologies are available. Climate change affects everybody, but 10% of the richest people are responsible of 40% of the emissions. So they need to question their lifestyles, cultural norms, and eventually change them.
Cities and other urban areas where most of the world's population lives are responsible for more than 2/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, either through the production of goods and services or those that are transported to cities. Buildings also play a crucial role in reducing emissions.
What this assessment shows is that both the building sector and cities can go to net zero carbon dioxide emissions towards the middle of the century. Nevertheless, the next decade is critical because both of these involve infrastructure that will commit us to emitting in certain ways. In cities, the most important areas of action are designing cities better to co-locate jobs and homes together, and also to enable better transportation systems where we actually can perhaps do active transport, as well as electrification, and finally removing and storing carbon dioxide in the urban environment, for example in trees and parks. Buildings can also help. For example, we show that in most climates by today we can do net zero energy and net zero carbon buildings. In developed part of the world, retrofit is more important, whereas in developing countries it is more important to focus on appliances and supplying the energy in clean ways, for example through clean electricity.
The ways that we use transport, whether for travel or to transport goods, offers substantial potential for emissions reductions. But this depends on decarbonizing the power sector. Electric vehicles combined with low or zero emissions electricity offer the greatest potential, and advances in battery technologies could assist in the electrification of trucks. For shipping and aviation, which are harder to decarbonize, low-emission hydrogen and biofuels offer alternatives to going electric. These options, combined with solutions in other areas, like cities and reducing demand, offer us a way forward in the transport sector. A quarter of global emissions comes from the industry sector, where achieving net zero is challenging. Getting there would require new production processes and using low and zero greenhouse gas electricity, hydrogen, and, where necessary, carbon capture and storage.
産業部門は2000年以降他のどの部門の排出量よりも急速に増加してきていて、間接的な排出量、つまり発電や熱を作る時の排出量などまで含めると全排出量の 34% という主要な排出源です。 社会の中で利用している製品の量は1人当たりで見ると、一部の先進国では頭打ちになってきましたが、世界的に見ると増えています。産業による生産は今後も増え、排出も増えてしまう可能性があるということです。いかにその排出量を減らすかですが、省エネやエネルギー効率向上は引き続きとても重要ですし、材料の効率的な利用、製品のリユースやリサイクル、あるいは電化や水素の利用、インフラの整備など多岐にわたる努力が必要です。ゼロ排出にする技術は確かに存在していますが、5年から15年の集中的な技術革新、商業化、そして新たな産業発展の政策が必要です。技術開発だけではなく、その新しい社会に合わせた新しい材料の需要、その市場の開発、ガバナンス、あるいは再エネという新しいエネルギー地政学から来る新しいバリューチェーンもあるでしょう。新しい世の中に合わせた新しい産業の構造が必要なのです。
Limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius will not be possible without carbon dioxide removal. Carbon dioxide removal approach can be either natural solution as sequestering and storing carbon on land and ocean, as well as technologies that pour CO2 directly out of the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide removal can counterbalance hard to eliminate emission from aviation and industrial processes. In the long term, scaling up carbon dioxide removal could reverse global warming. However, still investment and research are needed.
The next few years will be critical, but there are ways to improve our chances of success.
With regard to finance, there is a considerable gap between the requirements to respond to climate change and the existing financial flows. Current financial flows are a factor of 3 to 6 lower than the requirements by the year 2030 to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius. And this is a signal both for governments and also for the international community with regard to the need to close this gap, which is wider in the case of the developing countries, taking into account the limited capacity they have in terms of finance, in terms of technology, and in terms of institutional capacity. The situation is much more difficult in the case of the less developed countries.
Accelerated climate action is critical to sustainable development. Climate change increasingly threatens the health and livelihoods of people around the globe and the health of our planet. In all countries, actions to limit global warming that result in wider benefits to society can increase the pace, depth, and breadth of emissions reductions.
In this report, we show how mitigation goes hand in hand with achieving many of the Sustainable Development Goals. For example, if we look at the Sustainable Development Goal, green and blue infrastructure, we see that green roofs and facades, networks of parks and open spaces, wetlands and urban agriculture not only absorb and store carbon, but at the same time achieve many other Sustainable Development Goals. They can reduce pressure on urban sewer systems, reduce flood risk and heat island effects, and also deliver health benefits from reduced air pollution.
We have the tools and know-how required to limit warming and secure a livable future. Regulatory and market instruments and policies play a crucial role in strengthening the response. More ambitious emissions reductions require joined-up policymaking across government at different levels and through international cooperation.
The IPCC is the gold standard for climate science. Our reports provide governments and policymakers with the most up-to-date knowledge on climate change that helps inform their decision-making on climate-related policies. This assessment cycle has been the most intensive in IPCC's history, not only due to the high number of IPCC reports, but also because we had to find innovative ways to adapt to the challenges of the pandemic. The pandemic didn't stop the work of IPCC, and together we delivered.
Climate change is the result of more than a century of unsustainable energy and land use, lifestyles and patterns of consumption and production. This report shows how taking action now can move us toward a fairer, more livable world.
Thank you everyone for joining this wonderful session. See you all tomorrow at the same time with the same link. Feedback link is being shared in chat box. Kindly fill up the feedback form. It's mandatory for receiving certificate. Certificates will be updated on the website. Kindly fill up the feedback form. Dear participants, quickly fill up the feedback form. We will be ending the meeting in 5 minutes.